Well, let's take the Gospels, for example, the Gospel writers. The subject of money is really, apart from the kingdom of God, is really the next biggest topic through the Gospels. So for Jesus and for the New Testament writers, this was a really important issue.
More than love, more than salvation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which I think must be a signpost to us, an indication to us that really, if it's really important for the Bible and for the Bible writers, then it must be really important for us as well. I think for the New Testament writers, there is a much greater emphasis on the dark side of money. The fact that money is a power that is very dangerous. In fact, I like to say that it seems to me that Jesus' attitude to money is that it's like a stick of dynamite. It has the potential to do quite a bit of good, but it can do an awful lot of damage. And that's consistent with the New Testament writers. There's this regard for saying, we better be careful with this thing here. It's a power in itself. It can control us much more easily than we can control it. And there's an insatiability about money as well. The sense that the more we have, the more we want. So we need to be really, really careful with it.
That contrast between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of mammon, that you cannot serve both, that appears to be in direct conflict with the way in which we do commerce in the world today. Are they totally incompatible, do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a sense in which money is neutral at some level. So clearly we need money to live, and our system requires that we trade, and money is the medium that we do most of that with. So I don't think Jesus is suggesting that we have to extract ourselves from the system, but I think in terms of what dominates or controls our lives, what determines our decisions and our priorities, our ambitions, all that stuff, he's saying, actually, you've got a choice here. You've really got a choice about two visions for life and for economic life. And either in our context, you can buy into the great Kiwi dream and all that goes with that, or you can buy into the kingdom dream, which is very different.
And incompatible. You can't have both in some ways.
I think Jesus is really alerting us to the fact that you can't have it both ways, really. You've got to determine which dream you're going to aspire to, which dream you're going to chase.
There is an aspect about our society as well where people tend to equate money with happiness. The more money you have, the more happy you are. But then when we read the headlines, we find, well, actually, often the opposite of that is true.
Yeah. The fact that I woke up this morning and I knew that I had food in the cupboard and that I had a safe roof over my head, all that stuff does count in terms of my sense of well-being. But once I start aspiring to or gaining far more than I actually really need, then it can really work against my sense of happiness.
That other aspect of acquiring stuff, and we've seen this recently with the debt crisis globally, that if I don't have the money to buy what I need in order to get the status I want in society, then I can borrow money for that. And then, of course, that can become a trap and spiral and get out of control. We've seen, if you like, the reaping of the capitalist whirlwind in many different societies in that regard. The lack of wealth and the bondage that comes with debt can be seen as quite an evil thing in some ways.
Absolutely, that's right. And I think what's horrifying is really that our system has to encourage the gaining of credit, which is really just debt. It's just twisting the... so it's more acceptable, I guess, and it entraps us rather than frees and liberates us. And I think that's tremendously sad. But of course the system as we've got it at the moment, the economic system, is on this cycle of wanting to produce more and more. And of course, if you produce more and more goods, then you've got to convince people that they really need what you've got to sell. Yeah. And then if they don't have the ready cash, then of course, then you've got to offer the credit to be able to allow them to get what they want now, so that they can enjoy it right now.
And that system needs to keep spinning in order to keep maintaining the momentum, which takes us further and further into debt.
Absolutely, that's the horrifying cycle that we're on.
There's an aspect of the capitalist system which seems to be dependent upon scarcity causing value. That value is increased through the scarcity of commodities. There's an aspect of that which means in order for people to be affluent, there needs to be another group of people who don't have in order for that scarcity to exist, which itself seems like a system of oppression.
Yes, very much so, that's right. And I think for the average, reasonably well-off Kiwi, there's generally no association that they make in their mind between the choices that they make economically and what impact that has on those who struggle with life, whether that be people in New Zealand or people overseas. But there's very definitely a connection there. I'm not saying that we should induce guilt on ourselves every time we purchase stuff that we don't really need, but I do think that we need to be a little bit more reflective about the implications of the economic choices that we make. I think there's an assumption that most of us make when we read the Bible, that when it talks about the warnings against riches and wealth and the implications, the consequences of that, that's talking about some other group of people. That's talking about the Bill Gateses of this world and those that are really wealthy. So we do a little exercise of relativity, really. We compare ourselves with others. Oh, they've got a lot more than I have, so it doesn't really apply to me. My reading of the Bible's message on money really changed substantially when I started to see that I was one of the rich. I was one of the wealthy. In terms of the global scale, what I have is definitely in the top 5% of those in the world. And so that's a much more sobering exercise reading the Bible through that lens. But I think it's a very necessary way to read the Bible for most of us.
In terms of a kingdom of God way of using money, how do you think we should respond to it? What are some, if you like, Christian alternative ways to the system and society in which we live?
Right. Well, I don't think it's extracting ourselves from the system in total, but I do think that it's, again, getting things in perspective. And what I picked out when I was reading the Bible around the subject was really that there are clearly some practices and disciplines that the Bible encourages that can really act as anchor points for me to live well, but live faithful to the Scriptures. So, for instance, the issue of trusteeship, or we often talk about stewardship, but I think trusteeship's a better word, reminding myself that the resources that I have are not mine to do with as I please, that they are actually God's, that God's ownership should dominate all that I have. And I am there to manage well His resources, not my resources. The issues of gratitude and of generosity and of contentment. Contentment's a big thing because, of course, our system encourages discontentment all the time. So the sense of learning to be content with what we've got, learning to know when enough is enough, learning to say, this is what I need and to live on, and then saying to God, okay, how, God, do you want me to use the rest of my resources to pursue your kingdom's work?